Welcome to Our Health Inheritance. I'm Liz, and if you didn't see a previous post of mine, I'll tell you a little bit about this. It's my passion project related to my journey through genetic counseling, genetic testing, and taking action to prevent the health challenges that I am predisposed to. So, my genetic testing results show that I am positive for the breast cancer gene mutation BRCA2 or BRCA2. And in order to prevent my chances of getting breast cancer, which was an 85% chance, I went ahead and did a prophylactic bilateral mastectomy before being diagnosed with cancer. That makes me a previvor. Now, I'm also predisposed to ovarian cancer as well as melanoma because of this same genetic mutation. Now, in my last post, I talked about the surgery itself for the mastectomy. And now I'm going to talk a little bit about the recovery and my reconstructive process. So, the recovery itself was challenging, I will say. I had some setbacks. I have a hard time with medications and things like that, so there were some setbacks there. But also, I got an infection, and they actually ended up having to remove one of the tissue expanders. Now, what a tissue expander is when they do the mastectomy, because I chose to do reconstructive surgery, they went ahead and I call it installing, but they installed two tissue expanders under the skin. I don't remember if it's under the muscle, but I think it's under the muscle and the skin. But anyways, on my chest, they in where the two implants would be installed, they put two tissue expanders. And the tissue expander on one side had to be removed because of an infection. So they said I need to go ahead and just heal completely from that before they are going to put in a new tissue expander on that side. So we did not move forward with my reconstructive process until I was going to be completely healed. So along that journey of healing, I actually had a wonderful surprise that was unplanned, but my beautiful mother, who passed away in 1981 from breast cancer, the one that I received this genetic mutation from, she actually, on the anniversary of her death, this is my belief, she sent me my child. So I wasn't supposed to be ovulating, but I was blessed to become pregnant on the anniversary of her death. That's the date of conception. I counted back and tied it to that date exactly. And I know for a fact that my mom sent this child to me because I was doubting whether or not I should be a mother. I was doubting if it was responsible to actually have a child, knowing that I had a 50% chance of passing this genetic mutation onto my child. And, I just wasn't sure. I wasn't married. I was in a relationship, but I wasn't to the point where I was discussing having children. And I just had a mastectomy. I was wrestling with the fact that I was going to have to remove my ovaries before the age of 40 in order to prevent ovarian cancer. And, I was just questioning a lot of things. And that decision was made for me. And it was the biggest blessing in all of this. So I believe wholeheartedly my mother sent this child to me, placed her in my womb, and everything just made sense after that. Once I knew I was pregnant, I obviously still had some concerns that I might pass this gene on, but I felt comfortable with the fact that it was meant to be, and that, we are able to identify this gene and we can take proactive measures to prevent getting cancer once we know if we are positive or if my child will be positive. So in my mind, I wanted to test her in the womb. I was just all gung-ho. My partner was not so much. He and I agreed, said, let's let her decide. At the time, we didn't know if she was a she, but she eventually was a she, is a she. And so that was the decision. We decided that when she's of age, she can go ahead and make that decision if she even wants to test. That is the first decision you have to make. And the genetic counseling, which we will introduce her to when the time is right, genetic counseling helps you come to that decision. It weighs all the pros and cons, gives you all the information that you need, And I wholeheartedly recommend genetic counseling. It was a wonderful journey for me. That process was just so important. And so I will definitely introduce our daughter, to that process. Now, so I had to pause my reconstruction because I was pregnant. So we just kind of put everything on hold. I continued to heal from the removal of the tissue expander due to the infection. So that was surgery number 2, was to remove it. Surgery number 1 was the mastectomy and simultaneously putting in the tissue expanders. Surgery 2 related to this was removing one of the tissue expanders. Then I went through the healing process, enjoyed my pregnancy, did all of that. And then after I gave birth a few months later, we went ahead and put the tissue expander back in. So then you heal from that surgery. Time goes on, everything's healed up. Now we start the process of inflating the tissue expanders. So these are basically a very thick balloon, so to speak, that is put where the implants are going to go. And the goal is to stretch out your skin, make room for the implant, because when they do the mastectomy, they remove everything. I mean, the skin, the nipples, all of the breast tissue. I was literally concave. I was bones, skin, and muscle on my chest. And I didn't even talk about, I don't think I talked about the first time I looked down and saw, you know, the result of the surgery, which, as you can imagine, was shocking. Even though you know what to expect, it's still shocking. But I was so focused on preventing breast cancer, it was just part of the process and move forward through that. So the tissue expander process involves going to the doctor regularly. They put a needle in through your skin into the port that is on the front of the tissue expander, and they inject you or inject the expander with saline. So this happens, every 3 to 4 weeks until you get to the point where the skin is stretched out enough that you can fit the size of implant that you're comfortable with and that is possible for your body. So that process took time. Obviously, it wasn't comfortable, but there was a lot of, uncomfortable feeling of the skin stretching and things like that. But they do it gradually, so it wasn't terribly painful, especially compared to the recovery from the mastectomy. That was much more painful. So, but months go by, you get to the point where there is the potential to put in the size of an implant that you want, that you're comfortable with, and that your doctor feels would work for you. And then you go ahead and have another surgery to remove the tissue expanders and put in the implants. Then after that, you have another choice to make. You can choose to do nipple reconstruction, where they actually construct a nipple, something that looks like it, or you can do tattooing. I chose to do nothing. It just wasn't important to me, and I just did not do that. So, kind of a funny story is because my daughter now is at this point of my reconstruction. She's a toddler, and she has seen me without a shirt on, just, as you would, just being around your mother, dressing and things like that. And then she saw my sister change one time. She's 2 or 3 years old at this time. And she asked my sister, why does she have nibbles? And she used to call her nipples nibbles. And my sister didn't really know how to respond, but just said it's part of the body. She goes, well, when you grow up, I thought they went away. And my sister looked kind of perplexed. And then she told me, and I said, oh, well, that makes sense because she has them. She assumed because I don't, that when you grow up, they just disappear. And it was just a very sweet, kind of naive take on things, but it was like surprised us. It was just a surprising kind of funny thing that occurred. I thought I would share because the little things you don't even think about. My daughter never had any idea that that there was anything different or wrong or different about me. I shouldn't say wrong, but different about me. She just assumed they went away as you grew up. So another huge part of this journey related to my pregnancy is when I did get pregnant, it dawned on me. I had not thought ahead about this because I wasn't planning a pregnancy. But it dawned on me that I would not be able to breastfeed. That one hit me harder than the loss of my breasts. Losing my breasts wasn't that big of a deal to me. I just was so focused on preventing breast cancer. And I had already had a breast reduction many years before. So I think about 6 years before. So I already felt a little disconnected from my breasts, and I just wasn't really that concerned with not having them. And but what I had not even thought of until I got pregnant was my inability to breastfeed my child. And I know many children are not breastfed, and formula works fine for many people, but it wasn't what I wanted. And my mom had breastfed me and my siblings, and it was just, for me, what I would have liked to do. So this unexpected pregnancy comes about. I start trying to wrap my brain around the breastfeeding topic and how I'm going to address that. And then my wonderful cousin was also pregnant, just like 6 weeks ahead of me, and I started researching donated breast milk and finding out that there's a whole co-op of people that donate their breast milk to people like me who are unable to breastfeed. And my cousin was the first one to chime in. She is like a super producer of milk. it was She's had multiple pregnancies, and we knew she could produce a lot of milk. And she offered to pump and save milk for my child. And so I knew I would have, I think we had like a stockpile of a month of breast milk from her before my child was even born. And that was like super special. I also joined a breast milk co-op, and the women in that co-op were so wonderful. I have some relationships still to this day with many of the ones that donated to my child. And I mean, I would drive all over town. I drove to the Bay Area. I drove up and down Northern California collecting milk and just having a freezer full. I actually traveled a lot because my partner at the time was still residing in New York, and we were back and forth. And I would go to New York and had actually had milk donors in New York, New Jersey, Florida. Like wherever I went, I found these wonderful women who had more breast milk than they needed. And they would, especially when they had children similar age to our daughter, it was perfect because your milk actually does kind of is in stages, right? So it's appropriate for the right. You can have milk, use any milk from any age from a breast, from someone's breast milk, but it is optimal if the children are the same age when the breast milk was pumped. So that was really special. And then my daughter ended up playing with some of the children you know, who these mothers had. And I mean, it was just like this amazing community. So I'm still friends with some of these ladies, and they were just a big part of our process. And I was able to keep her on breast milk for almost 8 months. And I did introduce formula after I think 4 months, so that I always had one bottle at night that I would give her that was formula, because I wanted to make sure she could tolerate formula just in case I ever ran out of breast milk or I couldn't find a donor or there was, a batch that the freezer went out or something like that. So I always had that. But it was just so special. And we kind of joke that maybe she was drinking like superpowers or all this different DNA from, apparently you can get DNA from breast milk. I read this somehow. And so we're thinking she has DNA from all these amazing women from all over the country who are just generous, kind, healthy. Like they really were mindful of what they were putting in their bodies because they were breastfeeding. And my daughter got to benefit from all of their milk. And she's a pretty amazing kid. And she, like walked super early and was like just super smart, and she still is. And so we kind of would joke that she must have just received like incredible DNA from all these wonderful women. So shout out to the breast milk donors. You guys are amazing. And I think that's where I'll stop for now because that's a lot. This has been a longer post than I anticipated, but it's such a big part of my story. So thank you so much. Our Health Inheritance. I'm just going to continue to share my story step by step. There's a lot of twists and turns. Some recent events have come up that also play a role in my story, but I'm going to take the story chronologically, and then we will end up at present day. But right now, I just want to thank you for listening, if you're still listening, and have a wonderful weekend.